Okay, everyone, good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. Welcome to this third installment of our political leader election series. My name is John Wishart, and I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. This series is a partnership initiative by 6 organizations in the business leadership and economic development space from the province's 3 largest cities. We are presenting this series of 5 political leader webinars in the lead up to the September 14th provincial election. We hope these presentations, your questions, and the leaders' responses will help inform everyone as voting day nears. Joining the Greater Moncton Chamber in this project is the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, the St. John Region Chamber, Ignite Fredericton, Economic Development Greater St. John, and 3Plus Corporation. I'd also like to thank the Atlantic Provinces Chamber of Commerce for their support. And speaking of the Atlantic Chamber, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to 2 letters that may help frame some of the discussion today. The Atlantic Chamber submitted a letter on behalf of chambers from around New Brunswick to the main political parties in this election, outlining election priorities. Similarly, 10 organizations that include the 3 city chambers and other business groups that presented the Turning Point virtual conference earlier this year sent a letter on economic growth to the leaders last week. Copies of both of these letters will be posted in the chat of today's Zoom webinar. So here's how this will unfold. Our guest speaker today will have between 10 and 20 minutes to make some opening remarks to our audience. And this will be followed by a moderated Q&A with your questions. So today's moderator will be Krista Ross, the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber. And I should note that everyone's microphones are muted because of the number of participants. So please post your question at any time. You can start now via the chat function found at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We will attempt to pose as many questions as time allows in that hour. We will give preference to business or economic questions. And I will also note that today's webinar and the entire leader series is being recorded, and links will be shared on the respective chamber social media channels. So enough of the intro talk. It's now my great pleasure to introduce David Coon, the leader of the Green Party of New Brunswick. David, the floor is now yours.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks to all of the chamber members for helping to organize this opportunity for all the leaders to speak to your membership through this wonderful technology of Zoom. It's not quite the same as being face-to-face, but those are the realities today during this public health emergency. As Greens, we're committed to placing the well-being of people and communities at the heart of government decision-making while protecting the natural environment upon which we utterly depend. So we think about it in this way, that we need to have a strong social foundation, a floor upon which everyone will experience a decent quality of life, where well-being is the priority, a floor which they won't fall below. And then within an envelope of ecological sustainability and stability and climate stability. So in that space, we can imagine a really dynamic economy that is meeting real needs and creating good work and ensuring that it does what economies should do to meet the needs of society and of our communities. So we've got sort of 3 top priorities. Of course, the first one is to navigate the pandemic safely for New Brunswickers, to ensure that people and small businesses are supported when they're needed, that we don't see people or businesses ending up as victims of the pandemic, so that when we come out the other end, people and businesses will be in a place to flourish. So that's one. And I might say, as part of it, of course, Dr. Jennifer Russell and her team of public health specialists, physicians, and epidemiologists are essential to ensure that we have that advice in terms of helping set the direction, helping with that navigation, and we would ensure that their budget returned at least to what it was when Brian Gallant first formed government back in 2000 and when was that? 14. The second one is to ensure that people have rapid access to primary health care. It's a huge challenge in New Brunswick. So many people don't have access to primary health care, and half of those on waiting lists essentially are in the greater Fredericton area. And if we're going to improve the overall brand for New Brunswick, we have got to, in addition to solving the problems for our own people, ensure that we have a healthcare system that is meeting needs and meeting those needs when they're needed, where they're needed. And we don't have that, and we need that. So that's a second priority that would integrate as well mental health care a little more closely into primary health care. And third, to decentralize decision-making and management of public services in the province. Our sense is that a number of the problems associated with the delivery of public services today in New Brunswick have resulted from an over-centralization of the system, so that decision makers and managers now are too remote from the realities that are happening on the ground, whether it's in a school or a hospital or in economic development in a community or region. And so we would pursue that, rebalance that arrangement between central decision-making and management and more decentralized decision-making and management. So those are the three big things in the short term we would be focused on. With respect to our economy, of course, small businesses, small enterprises, small businesses, cooperatives, and social enterprises, nonprofits sometimes get forgotten too, are really the backbone of the economy. You hear that all the time, but often our economic development strategies don't operate that way. We're fortunate in some of the cities like Fredericton, which I'm most familiar with, of course, where we have local economic development agencies like Fredericton and so on, which really enable and animate local economic development here, but that's not the norm outside of cities across the province. So one of the things we would really focus on is ensuring that that capacity is there to pursue local economic development in the regions of the province and the communities of the province. And we would ensure there's supportive public policy to make that happen. I'm so impressed as I travel the province's leader during the election, but before the election as well. Incredible enthusiasm and energy of entrepreneurs in every corner of the province who are trying to, or are beginning businesses, launching startups, establishing nonprofits, who are just so inspiring, but so creative, but find that they run up against barriers in moving forward, and considerable disinterest from the economic development sort of side of government, because they're seen as too small to warrant interest. And we've got to change that. For small enterprises, there are a couple of things that, especially during the context of COVID, that can be addressed to be helpful. One is property taxes. So we would set up a program to, on a case-by-case basis, enable the waiving of property taxes during COVID, or putting them off depending on the particular situation, to help reduce those costs for businesses that are really struggling. And we know the sectors that are particularly in trouble because of COVID rules, like tourism, like the hospitality industry, the entertainment industry. So those things that really depend on people traveling and people congregating in any numbers, particularly indoors, small and large venues alike. There's also energy costs, which would really help for small enterprises in terms of addressing productivity. So on energy costs, our particular focus would be to initiate a major retrofit renovation program to assist businesses and households, for that matter, to significantly reduce their energy costs through improving their energy efficiency, both of their building envelope that they occupy if they own their building, the technology that they're utilizing inside the building, lighting and heating systems, and so on, so that businesses could see 20-30% reduction in their energy costs. And that would, range from a cafe that's got a big, huge front window on the street they're operating on, that's single pane of glass. It's just a big, it's like having a hole in the wall for your heating bill. To put in high performance windows there, to commercial buildings which need better ventilation and other upgrades that can make a difference to their overall costs, and actually to their from COVID perspective, the importance of improving their air quality. And that the most important part of that program would be to ensure through a loan program that the upfront capital costs could be covered, because that's the biggest number one barrier everyone faces, despite the payback, despite often rapid payback on those investments. Most businesses, as many of us who in our households, have many other competing priorities that end up taking any other sort of investment money or disposable income that might be available. So this would help overcome that barrier, which then could be paid back through the savings over time. So that would be huge, and also obviously would contribute to our overall goal of reducing our carbon footprint. And then finally on wages, because we would increase the minimum wage and make some amendments to the Labor Standards Act to ensure, and COVID has really pointed this out, that there needs to be some paid sick time for people to provide during COVID wage subsidies to help those small businesses that need that, to accommodate those extra costs. So those are some of the issues there with respect to small enterprises, businesses, nonprofit social enterprises, and cooperatives that we would focus on. With respect to the economy overall and the need to grow our population in terms of economic development and helping drive that, one of my priorities there is we need more autonomy around immigration and the settlement and integration of immigrants and newcomers to New Brunswick. And so I would seek to sign an accord, negotiate an accord with Ottawa, much like Quebec has, to give us some autonomy, greater autonomy beyond what exists in the Atlantic Accord over immigration and the integration of newcomers into New Brunswick, so that we can handle both the glitches that happen regularly for people. And I've, in my role as MLA, many people have come to me with problems with immigration, both business people and others. And it is a nightmare trying to solve what would seem to be a very simple problem, often a paperwork problem, with federal immigration. They don't return calls, for one thing, not even to MPs or MLAs. So it's very frustrating. We need more autonomy there, but enable us also to help ensure that immigration is proceeding as we need it to in New Brunswick. There's some obvious classes of folks who should have a rapid stream to a permanent residency status, like international students, like foreign workers who come here year in and year out, and so on. One could make a list. But again, I've had international students who are going to be sent home because of paperwork problems. They're already integrated into the community. They've got a network, the all-important network, then to succeed and work. So we need that kind of autonomy over immigration, and not just the autonomy, but generally as a province and as municipalities and regions, we need to do a better job of planning in our planning and actual programming to help integrate more solidly into our communities. There's a lot of initial work when folks come around settlement, but then in terms on the integration side, helping to build those networks, helping to understand the culture they're operating in, and so on. It's much more of a gap, I would say. So that's that area. On natural resources, we see 4 areas, I would say. So renewable power and fuel. So we're blessed with lots of renewable resources in the province to generate power. One of the things there, for example, that I tabled a bill on not that long ago was to enable municipalities to work out an agreement with a renewable power company to provide them with, say, wind power to help power their municipal operations at considerable savings to what they would be buying from MB Power. But the way the Electricity Act is written, it prevents that from happening. And unfortunately, my bill didn't succeed. But that's the kind of change we would make. And I'll speak a little more later about renewable fuel, but we certainly have potential for that as well. When you look at our waste streams from our primary sort of production sectors, our waste streams from fish and seafood processing, from pulp and wood processing, from food processing, that's all raw material to manufacture renewable natural gas or biogas and biodiesel, which the Nordic countries have gone pretty far in doing so. Very impressive, and I think that's something we could use as a model. Third, diversifying our forest products, the more diversified approach to forest management. We have the potential to create lots of local manufacturing with value-added products if we take advantage of the diversity within our forests and create a better balance than we have now between managing for large commodities like studwood and pulp and managing for value-added products that can be made from the diversity of other types of timber from the forest. And finally, third, agriculture. Certainly there's plenty of room to grow, pardon the pun, for agriculture in this province to increase production for domestic market, for the regional market, and not just for food, but for other products such as hemp, industrial hemp, which is showing good potential. And finally, the other natural resource sector I see we need to build on, of course, is tourism. And I call that natural resource sector because, in fact, most tourism is based on our natural assets in the province, along with our culture and history. And so there's, of course, tremendous potential to expand there, although right now with COVID, that's not very easy. So that's what I would say on natural resources. So overall in economic development, there's a couple of approaches. We would look at this through the frame of 2 things. One is import replacement. There's a tremendous opportunity to produce more of what we need in New Brunswick in terms of products and services. And there's a public desire to see greater self-sufficiency in food and renewable energy, but also overall, there's a strong interest in seeing more local production for the local market, and with a concrete and effective import reduction strategy or replacement strategy, we could guide that with some careful support through government procurement to give that a bump start. So that's one, and the other frame for economic development that's is an imperative, of course, is within 30 years we're going to have to be net zero when it comes to carbon, and so that presents a whole range of opportunities, some of which I mentioned in terms of economic development, particularly when you think of, in addition to the renewable energy sector, which is huge potentially. is the building sector and transportation. So we have the opportunity to move, and we'll need to move towards smart buildings and smart transportation, net zero energy buildings and homes. We've got a construction industry that is on the residential side well trained and committed to moving in that direction, although there's not much support of government policy for them, and we could ramp up pretty quickly on the commercial building side as well. The same goes for the context of net zero over 30 years. Net zero carbon is changes to our manufacturing and industrial processes to achieve that, and that opens all kinds of opportunities as well to get there. You look at some of the progress we've made in these areas when you think of things like smart grid in New Brunswick and what that should be able to do when it's fully implemented in terms of supporting distributed renewable generation around the province, and supporting smart homes and smart businesses, and the cybersecurity that is developed, companies that are developing in New Brunswick, well, particularly around Fredericton. I had a tour of the cybersecurity center the other day, thanks to Larry and his team, and it was really quite impressive and intriguing. And one of the great opportunities, I think, early on in terms of branding cybersecurity in New Brunswick is to roll it out with a more rapid rollout of the smart grid, so that we can sort of put it in the window to the world that we have an extensive active smart grid in this province that is well protected from any kind of outside cyber threats. And that would be, I think, a wonderful thing to be able to put into the window of New Brunswick. On the food side, I would say, this isn't food, but as a model, the craft alcohol business sector in this province is tremendously impressive, both beer, wine, spirits, and cideries now. And that's, I think, a model to look at for how we could move forward on food and local processing of food more than is happening currently. They seem to work together very well, those businesses, supporting each other, and are extremely committed to, in their supply chain, trying to support other New Brunswick businesses at the same time. So it's very impressive. I met with the association, I think, 2 weeks ago, and have toured some of the newer businesses that have opened up in the last couple of years during my trips around the province. So I don't want to take up too much time. I actually haven't been timing myself, but I'm probably well over the 20 minutes by now, so I'll stop there and we'll open up to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coon. We appreciate you participating today. We appreciate the information you're sharing and helping to make people make a decision on their voting for next week. Thanks too to John Wishart for launching today's session, and to our guests for attending. We'll go through the questions that are in the chat, and some people have been sending me questions in the chat, not or privately, so I'll be going through those ones as well. I would encourage you to drop your questions there if you're interested in having them answered. And I'm pleased to see that some of the people that have asked questions so far at the earlier 2 sessions are asking them again, so we're getting some consistency throughout, and we'll be able to help people again to make their decisions when it comes to voting by watching these presentations when we post the recordings. So the first question I'm going to send your way is from Carol Alderus from the Tourism Industry Association of New Brunswick. As an association, we're asking each party, the tourism industry was hit first and hardest when COVID-19 hit us earlier this year. Many operators barely survived the summer and may not survive until next year, especially restaurants, as they're now having to shut down their outdoor patios. What will you do to help the tourism industry?
Well, in the short term, of course, the limits, the constraints are there because of the pandemic, and that's problematic because of the nature of the business. The bubble didn't help as much as it should have, and I think that goes to the need to better promote New Brunswick. I think the New Brunswick brand, both in the region and nationally, needs some work. Unfortunately, the Premier's personality is such that he often speaks quite negatively about the province, about the challenges we face, and it doesn't help. We've got a great story to tell in terms of New Brunswick, our quality of life, the nature of our province, nature of our people, and I think we can do a far more effective job of promoting that, certainly within the bubble right now, and when we open up beyond. But you know, in the short term, we did have movement around the province, that's for sure. My wife and I traveled north and did a New Brunswick coastal tour from Lamec all the way to Alma. And it was wonderful to see so many people from Fredericton, St. John area, up in Caraquet and Lamec and Miscou in that area. And then down in Alma and Grand Manan too, so many people from Bathurst and the Acadian Peninsula traveling and visiting often for the first time as well in the south. There was definitely some movement around the province, but most of the tourism operators talked to where we were eating or staying said they didn't get the impact or the bump they thought they would from the Atlantic bubble. So as long as that is in place, we need to do a better job of bringing our neighbors into the province.
The next question is from the New Brunswick Real Estate Association. They're seeking an answer from each of the parties on how will your party address deficiencies and the unfair aspects of the current property tax regime and local government structure in the province.
So in terms of the property tax regime, two things. There's some property tax reforms through amendments to the Assessment Act we would make right away, including incorporating the equivalency principle that New Brunswick is one of the few places in the province that doesn't have, in the country that doesn't have one. So we can have properties that are identical with widely different property assessments and therefore widely different property taxes. It's just patently unfair. So with respect to sort of cities versus outlying areas, I think is what you're getting at there particularly, we would do a tax inquiry so we're clear on what the situation is and how best to redress that differential and some other unfairnesses across the tax system to overall improve fairness in our tax system. But with respect to sort of city outlying areas approach, the way we would go at this is, one, we would eliminate LSDs. There would be no LSDs anymore. We would have local government. There would be everyone would be part of a local government. In some cases, it would be rural communities. In other cases, it might be cities that have expanded their boundaries some local amalgamation, but everyone would have government. And that would help certainly with taking the politics out of taxation, which is part of the root of the problem here, where the mayor for all the communities within LSDs, local service districts, is a minister of environment and local government, a politician at the provincial level, and there's always that ever-present concern in the past of worrying about the rural MLA's election prospects if they change tax systems in those rural communities. So it's very centralized, top-down decisions made at that level, and that in my system, you'd have a local government system that would ensure that we get better results that way. We'd actually have, in that case, finally, taxation with representation for everyone. I'm sorry, but living as I did in the past in a rural community, I never felt like the Minister of Environment and Local Government, whoever they were, represented me, where my local mayor and council would. So that's an important change we would make. And just a little addendum to that, we would also modify the current Regional Service Commission to ensure that around our cities we have a regional service a system of sharing and delivering regional services by creating metropolitan service commissions that reflect kind of the greater Fredericton, Moncton, Greater St. John areas, and take out the actually truly more remote rural areas and move them into appropriate regional service commissions or rural service commissions. But we need to have a kind of a metropolitan structure wrapped around our major cities to help make sure our cities are thriving. But it needs to be done fairly, and we can do that. But I think when it comes down to it, people living outside of the cities directly feel connected to our cities, use them for a lot of reasons, including work, but entertainment and so on and so forth, recreation. And so let's capture that reality in sort of metropolitan, I call them service commissions. And if we create the right institution, it'll be a lot easier to move in their direction.
Our next question is from the New Brunswick Medical Society, asking how will the Green Party invest in healthcare if elected?
That's a big question. So in the legislature, what I embarked on was this idea of why don't we get everyone around the table? This was early on, to listen to those from within the healthcare system to really nail for us the big issues and their ideas of what can be done to solve them, and bring in some resource people to talk to us as well, so that Brunswick would be exposed to that and have an opportunity to kind of build awareness around what are the big issues, what's driving problems, and what are some of the solutions that could be implemented. And then all the parties would be around the table to try and take the politics out of it, so we don't continue to use healthcare reform as a political football, which is going on for too long to everyone's detriment. So I proposed a standing committee on healthcare reform to do that. And while the health minister was solidly behind it, in the end, neither he nor I could convince the premier to support it, which is unfortunate. And then it would have made recommendations, of course, and gone forward. But I still think we need to do that approach. I know the Medical Society has been championing the idea of having some other mechanism, getting everyone around the table to move forward, and that's it. I mean, we've got major reforms that need to be done on access to primary health care. We've got major reforms that need to be done to ensure our hospitals are able to fulfill their mandates effectively and well, without being sidetracked in doing a lot of things that really they're not set up or weren't set up to do. We need to better integrate our mental health system into primary health care and ensure that the community delivery of health care, where that makes the most sense, is happening and happening well around the province. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. And then the other piece, I guess, is mention is recruitment of doctors and nurses. So on that, I think there's two things right off the bat. One is we need to be in the same place as Nova Scotia and PEI in terms of incentives and so on. We can't be competing against our neighboring maritime provinces in terms of our own graduates and attracting other doctors and nurses here. We've got to have a level playing field, absolutely, and need to work that out. So that's one. And two is my understanding, as I've tried to dig into this, given the shortage of primary care providers, is recruitment is not that great. I mean, I've talked to our own medical students, and there was not a great effort to recruit them to stay here. Maybe that's changed in the last months, but that was their experience. I feel like the effort and investment in recruitment is the bare minimum on the part of the Department of Health. And it can't be the bare minimum. Again, we've got a great story to tell about our province and about our cities and our rural communities in terms of the quality of life that we're offering and what's going on. We've got some great, exciting sort of developments as well around the province, with things like the efforts that are going on in Fredericton with addictions support, and our midwifery clinic, Clinic 554, and what they're doing, and particularly the sort of pioneering work they've done on LGBTQ healthcare. So we've got some great examples that we need to roll out around the province as good models, and it's the kind of thing I think that would excite those who are trying to decide where to locate. But recruitment's got to look. I watch what the universities do for recruiting, raising money from their alumni around Canada and around the world. That's the kind of enthusiasm and spirit we need to bring to getting doctors and nurses to our province.
The next question refers to something you spoke about in your remarks, which was Have the Greens explored the impact of a $15 minimum wage on business? What about EI reform? Excuse me, or a basic, universal basic income as ways to provide base income, but not creating a disincentive to join the workforce, creating higher costs for business?
So yeah, so we're strong supporters of a guaranteed livable income or basic income guarantee, and that would need to, for the most part, be done in conjunction with the federal government, because you would end up shifting money from a lot of existing programs into the guaranteed livable income, of course. But we propose as a first step to kind of get our feet under us around that is to provide it for those with moderate to severe handicaps. And so it's not in one location in the province, it's rolled out across the province, but to a particular group as a first step to get some experience with it, see where the where the rough waters are and where the smooth waters are, and get it in shape to then rolled out further in different phases. In terms of the minimum wage, the thing is, yes, I mean, it's a dilemma, right? I mean, the best estimates of a living wage, say in the city of St. John, is something like just under $20 an hour, $19.50, I think, an hour. Various organizations have made those estimates. So even 15 is below that, but it's something that we'd phase in. And as I said, during the period, we would ensure there was support available for small businesses to cover those increased costs. But it is a dilemma. I mean, I guess our view is that if someone's on minimum wage and a business is in a position where they can only pay minimum wage, it's far better for government to step in and play a role than essentially that staff person having to subsidize the business through that low wage. So that's our underlying philosophy.
Another question that came up in the earlier two presentations this morning. What is your party or your party's position on the development of SMRs in New Brunswick? It was strongly supported as a growth strategy by the two other leaders who spoke earlier today.
Well, it's very risky business for a number of reasons. One, we know nuclear technology is extremely expensive. We've seen that experience with Canada's CANDU technology over since the 60s when it was first developed, and it's cost a lot of money. It's the reason that we have there's such a deficit at such a debt at NB Power. It's a prime driver of power rate increases and will be for the foreseeable future until we come to grips and deal with the debt overall at NB Power. So it's an expensive proposition that requires. Right now, it's essentially, at least one of the companies, it's essentially a concept in a computer. Read the patent on one of them that's being sued in New Brunswick, and it's a long way from getting anywhere. It's going to need, and they're looking for lots of public money to do so. So why it would seem to be high risk. And then on the environmental side and safety side, of course, you're talking about using plutonium, at least in one case, one technology for generating power, which creates all kinds of security concerns, as well as radioactive concerns, both in processing existing waste to extract the plutonium, and then that produced waste, and then the waste, of course, that are produced from the nuclear reactor itself. So lots of issues around it, and we can't wait for all those to be worked out to tackle climate change. We need to move quickly to a renewable-based energy system, and frankly, the amount of money that would be sucked into that technology in its development phase should be spent on supporting a shift to renewable energy now. We've got proven technology that's affordable, and invest around the margins there where we can add value.
I guess a bit of a supplementary question to that, but one that has been posed by one of our guests today. He writes, knowing that the Green Party is unlikely to form government, how do you intend to affect government policy for the increased adoption of renewables in a cost-effective manner?
Well, as we always have, through bills we bring forward, that sometimes government adopts or adopts parts of them, or we get them passed, and by ensuring that some of the things that we're advocating end up in provincial budgets, which has happened. So that's how we operate. If it's a minority government, that'll be straightforward. If it's a majority government, it's a little more difficult. But certainly in the first 4 years that I was there during majority government, I can point to a number of achievements I made, both in terms of legislation and budgetary matters that were a direct result of my work there as a Green.
Another question that has come in: what supports, resources, and solutions will you offer to support the recovery and growth of the arts sector?
So in the arts sector, there's a number of things that we've made commitments to, and there's some really concrete things that can be done. I mean, maybe it's better to deal in specifics. So for example, in terms of television production, we've got a very successful television program, a comedy, that's produced by Radio-Canada, or not produced by, but carried by Radio-Canada, across the country. And it is unable to open for production this season because it can't get insurance. So just like the Brunswick government stepped up to provide insurance for our seniors' homes because they lost theirs as a result of the pandemic, we would, as a government, and if we're not, and advocate that the government do this, to provide insurance. So something like that very successful television production can get back into production, so all those actors and crew can get back to work, and they can get back on the air. So that's a real specific, concrete example of kinds of things that can be done for artists. But I would say broadly, sort of that's a short-term, immediate, concrete, and there's sort of a number of examples as I talk to people in the arts community in the context of COVID that we can do like that. But in the longer term, I think artists would really benefit from something like a guaranteed livable income as it got more fully rolled out in a robust way.
Another question that's been sent along to me, and this is from your platform. It says, a Green government would abolish government funding, grants, loans, tax credits, etc. to companies that use tax havens to avoid paying taxes in New Brunswick. You'd eliminate property tax exemptions on heavy industries.
We're frozen. At least you're frozen on my screen. No, you're frozen for everybody else.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. So I'm not sure. I'll start this one over again. In your platform says a Green government would abolish government funding, grants, loans, tax credits, etc. to companies that use tax havens to avoid paying taxes in New Brunswick. Eliminate property tax exemptions on heavy industry. And, sorry, question just disappeared on my screen. Launch a public inquiry into our tax system, including property taxes, offshore accounts, etc. So the question is, why commit to doing number 2 and number 1 before doing number 3? Would the order not be to launch the public inquiry first?
I think there's some immediate things that need to be done that we well understand and are well aware of in terms of the lack of fairness in the system that can be acted on right away. And then more broadly, we need to do an inquiry into the entire tax system with our goal of bringing fairness to it overall. So I guess we felt confident that those things were pretty straightforward. But on the other ones, we need to dig into them and come up with a set of recommendations that could be acted on and be implemented.
A question here about immigration from Janet Moser. Immigration is critical as Canada's oldest and aging province. We know this because we hear the word often when we talk about the population and economic growth in New Brunswick. We've been a springboard province, so the issue isn't attraction. It might be how we attract and our difficulty in retaining. Why do you think this is? What can we do, in your opinion, to change it? And recently, IRCC has suggested a new pilot for Atlantic Canada so that local economic development agencies and chambers and so on can work directly with Petal to address the unique needs in the municipality. Give us your thoughts on an initiative of that nature.
I don't know if this is on my end or yours, but you're frozen. There you are. Okay.
Not sure how much of the question.
I heard most of Janet's question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear the
So-
piece about the IRCC suggesting a new pilot for Atlantic Canada?
No.
Okay, so economic development agencies and chambers would work directly with Petal to implement a program based on the unique needs of the municipality as well. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a good idea. But I also think that I mean, a lot of folks have come in who are newcomers to my office, my constituency office over time, and one of the things that I don't know if it's happening, and if it's not, that needs to happen, are we listening adequately to newcomers and immigrants and those who have been here for a while in terms of what kinds of things need to be put in place to ensure that people are well integrated into our communities and feel supported, and they're able to rapidly develop networks. I know Ignite Fredericton and has done a lot of work in that way as an agency, but more broadly, is that happening? And if that listening has been happening, it doesn't seem like the implementation across the province has been occurring very evenly, because that's certainly what I hear from folks a lot. That they need. We all know it's important to have a strong network, and how do we build that fairly rapidly? Is language training there for the families sufficiently, or for case of refugees, I guess particularly, is that there for them to help integrate more rapidly? The cultural integration and understanding, you know, what our culture is all about and how things work. So that's what I meant earlier about, you know, a lot of focus is put on the initial settlement, but in terms of then the integration, there doesn't seem to be enough support for that happening. And it can be right down to someone came to me one day and said, you know, women in our community, the immigrant community, don't understand about transition houses. And, you know, if they find themselves in a situation of domestic violence, they don't know what to do, they're stuck. And they kind of are coming at it perhaps from their culture, but don't understand in our cultural context, you know, how women respond and where the help is. So it's that kind of integration broadly that I think at the family level too, that's important that we do. And that requires lots of listening and then acting on things that we hear would be helpful being in that direction.
We have had gone through most of our questions today, and I want to give you a chance to say a couple of closing remarks before we hand it over to Larry Shaw from Ignite Fredericton. So is there something you'd like to say to close your comments today?
Well, I guess the thing I want to say is just hearkening back to remarks made earlier, is as I travel around the province touring during the legislative year and during the election, what strikes me is the tremendous disconnect between what's happening on the ground in terms of efforts at local economic development, the tremendous enthusiasm and entrepreneurship that's in every region of this province, things people are trying to do, things they're wanting to do, and the story that that keeps emerging from provincial government out there, it seems, which is quite different. So what I want to do is figure out how to, that we put in place those things to support those folks on the ground around the regions who are doing and want to do remarkable things. They're committed, and lots of them are younger, who it drives people nuts when they hear all this about people leaving. They've made this commitment to stay in New Brunswick to try and build something, and they're treated in the narrative out there by the province as if they don't really exist. So we need to focus more of a light on what they're doing and provide the kinds of supports necessary. I mean, I'll never forget hotspot parking created this subsidiary, Jump Energy, great ideas, and they were trying to move into the renewable power space, and they ran into legislative barriers. And they had everything in line for their first initiative, except for a contract from MB Power. So, which was really what led me to bring that original bill forward, to try and remove those legislative barriers. And we need to break those down to enable that kind of entrepreneurial get up and go. They had capital. I had set up meetings with them, with the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, and Small Business and Economic Development. And, it surprised them, and they were, oh, wow, why couldn't this go forward? And then in the end, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources voted against the bill. So you do with that. So that disconnect has to end, and we need to be reflecting tremendous initiatives that are happening locally, and supporting them with the kind of policy and funding that is needed in those regions, all our regions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Coon, for doing this with us today. This has been very helpful, and I know that our members from across the province are interested in what you have to say, and in understanding your position on issues that are important to them. I'm going to turn it over to Larry Shaw, CEO of Ignite Fredericton, to bring some closing remarks. Ignite, along with the Economic Development for Greater St. John and 3 Plus, partnered with our 3 chambers, the St. John Region Chamber and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton, and ourselves at the Fredericton Chamber, and we really appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over to Larry to give some closing remarks, and thanks again.
Well, thank you, Krista. As always, a great job. And David, it's really thank you very much for being here and participating in today. We're in the Maritimes. We're all first name basis. I think it's really important, though, to recognize that, the service that you put in as an elected official. You're the MLA representative for Fredericton South, also the leader of the Green Party. So thank you for participating in the leadership series that Krista referred to. I think it's also important, we really didn't, get a chance to recognize the leaders. We've gone through a significant event in the last 6 months, as everybody's fully aware. And I think the collaboration that happened between the leadership during the COVID incidences and developments, I think it should be commended on. And it certainly is something that we would want to see continue, regardless of what elections take place and how things sort of line up after the election. But again, David, thank you for the service that you provide, and thanks for participating today. As Krista mentioned, the 3 chambers, the Atlantic Chamber as well, the economic development organizations in each of the 3 cities, 3 Plus Corporation Enterprise, Greater St. John Enterprise, and Ignite Fredericton. We partner together, not only in series like this, but we partner every day. And I think that, it's important to recognize that, we're not having single conversations for economic development. We're not having single conversations for, the citizens of New Brunswick. We see ourselves as working for the citizens of New Brunswick, as you do. And I think it's also important to recognize that we're not competing with ourselves. If anything, we're just competing with, the rest of the world. And quite frankly, in New Brunswick, we're collaborating. So, I think, again, the political leadership series that's been coordinated here is just another demonstration of that. But also, and just in closing, I'd like to remind everybody that tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I believe I got the time right, at 8 o'clock, we're going to have another in the series, which is going to be the New Democratic Party. Mackenzie Tomlinson will be here. So if you have not registered for that event, please do so. I'm sure you can find the route to that through the Chamber's website. Or if all else fails, simply call Morgan. You can get anything from Morgan. He'll help you out. Please register, because we want to make sure that we give all the party leadership an opportunity to tell us what their plans are for the province of New Brunswick. So again, David, thank you very much for participating. Little special
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you for the call out on cybersecurity. We could have a whole program on that, but maybe that's down the road. Again, good luck on the election, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.